The desert sun bled across the horizon, painting the Nile in liquid gold. Palm trees swayed in the warm wind as the last barges of the day drifted lazily across the river. The people of Egypt whispered prayers to Ra, the sun god, as the sky darkened into purple. Inside the palace of Thebes, incense coiled through the air like silk. Marble floors gleamed, lined with torches that flickered against walls painted with scenes of conquest and eternity. Statues of the gods towered over courtyards where servants hurried with jugs of wine, trays of fruit, and scrolls bound in leather. It was the home of the Pharaoh, master of all lands touched by the Nile. But tonight, the palace hummed with something unusual. Not the celebration of a military victory, not the coronation of a new ruler. No, tonight the whispers were of a child, a princess born under the rare eclipse of the sun. Her name was Neferet, meaning the beautiful one. From the moment she drew breath, the priests claimed she was chosen by the gods themselves. Some said her cry during the eclipse was so sharp that the doves in the courtyard scattered. Others swore they saw the shadow of a falcon, the symbol of Horus, swoop above her chamber. The Pharaoh, her father, adored her. But the court, the generals, the high priests, they frowned. For in Egypt, daughters were brides, not rulers. Women could influence the throne, yes, but rarely sit upon it. A daughter of Pharaoh was to be married off for alliances, her womb more important than her words. But Neferet was different. From her earliest years, she asked questions no one wanted to answer. Why did the priests hold more land than the farmers? Why did scribes hoard knowledge when the people starved for wisdom? Why did war consume Egypt when the Nile already gave so much? By the age of 10, she was slipping into the libraries reserved for men, her small fingers tracing hieroglyphs on papyrus scrolls about the stars, medicine, and philosophy. She was told to stop. She was told to obey. But Neferet's hunger for truth was not one that could be starved. One evening, when she was no more than 12, Neferet sat beside her mother, Queen Anip, in the women's quarters. The queen embroidered a golden lotus on silk, her face calm and unreadable. "Mother," Neferet asked softly, "why is it forbidden for me to study with the scribes? Why can my brothers learn the secrets of the gods, but I must only weave and sing?" Her mother paused, needle poised above fabric. Slowly, she looked at her daughter. "Because the world does not yet belong to women, Neferet, but it will test you, perhaps one day, to see if you can change it." Those words burned into Neferet's soul. That night, when the moon hung full and pale over the Nile, she crept from her chambers barefoot, her robe trailing across the cold stone floor. A servant boy, loyal to her since infancy, led her down winding halls and into a narrow passage hidden behind a statue of Osiris. At its end lay the temple of Thoth, keeper of wisdom, where scribes bent over scrolls by lamplight. Neferet pressed her palms against the cracked door and slipped inside. Shelves towered over her, stacked of papyrus bound in leather straps. The smell of ink and dust filled her lungs. Her eyes widened. Astronomical charts, diagrams of the human body, records of kings and queens long forgotten. Her fingers brushed over one scroll, its title faded with age. On the Order of the Stars. She opened it, and for the first time, she saw the heavens not as gods alone, but as patterns, movements to be studied, understood, perhaps even predicted. A hand touched her shoulder. She spun. It was an old scribe, his beard white as linen, his eyes sharp but kind. "Princess," he whispered, "you should not be here." Neferet lifted her chin. "Then teach me, so I do not come in ignorance again." For a long moment, the scribe studied her. Then he sighed, and with trembling hands, spread the scroll before her. "Very well, but knowledge is power, and power has enemies." That was the night Neferet's destiny began. Over the years, she returned again and again, learning everything forbidden to her. Medicine, astronomy, diplomacy. She spoke to foreigners in secret, learning their languages, their grievances with Egypt's empire. By 16, her mind was sharper than the generals. By 18, her voice carried like the Nile itself. But shadows followed her. The priests whispered in dark corridors. The generals laughed at the idea of a woman with power. And one priest, draped in black linen, leaned close to a general and murmured words that would echo into history. The princess dreams of a world that is not ours. She must be silenced. The torches flickered. The Nile flowed on, and Neferet, daughter of Pharaoh, stood at the edge of a destiny that would one day shake the world. The desert sun bled across the horizon, painting the Nile in liquid gold. Palm trees swayed in the warm wind as the last barges of the day drifted lazily across the river. The people of Egypt whispered prayers to Ra, the sun god, as the sky darkened into purple. Inside the palace of Thebes, incense coiled in the air like silk. Marble floors gleamed, lined with torches that flickered against walls painted with scenes of conquest and eternity. Statues of the gods towered over courtyards where servants hurried with jugs of wine, trays of fruit, and scrolls bound in leather. It was the home of the Pharaoh, master of all lands touched by the Nile. But tonight, the palace hummed with something unusual. Not the celebration of a military victory, not the coronation of a new ruler. No, tonight the whispers were of a child, a princess born under the rare eclipse of the sun. Her name was Neferet, meaning the beautiful one. From the moment she drew breath, the priests claimed she was chosen by the gods themselves. Some said her cry during the eclipse was so sharp that the doves in the courtyard scattered. Others swore they saw the shadow of a falcon, the symbol of Horus, swoop above her chamber. The Pharaoh, her father, adored her. But the court, the generals, the high priests, they frowned. For in Egypt, daughters were brides, not rulers. Women could influence the throne, yes, but rarely sit upon it. A daughter of Pharaoh was to be married off for alliances, her womb more important than her words. But Neferet was different. From her earliest years, she asked questions no one wanted to answer. Why did the priests hold more land than the farmers? Why did scribes hoard knowledge when the people starved for wisdom? Why did war consume Egypt when the Nile already gave so much? By the age of 10, she was slipping into the libraries reserved for men, her small fingers tracing hieroglyphs on papyrus scrolls about the stars, medicine, and philosophy. She was told to stop. She was told to obey. But Neferet's hunger for truth was not one that could be starved. One evening, when she was no more than 12, Neferet sat beside her mother, Queen Anip, in the women's quarters. The queen embroidered a golden lotus on silk, her face calm and unreadable. "Mother," Neferet asked softly, "why is it forbidden for me to study with the scribes? Why can my brothers learn the secrets of the gods, but I must only weave and sing?" Her mother paused, needle poised above fabric. Slowly, she looked at her daughter. "Because the world does not yet belong to women, Neferet, but it will test you, perhaps one day, to see if you can change it." Those words burned into Neferet's soul. That night, when the moon hung full and pale over the Nile, she crept from her chambers barefoot, her robe trailing across the cold stone floor. A servant boy, loyal to her since infancy, led her down winding halls and into a narrow passage hidden behind a statue of Osiris. At its end lay the temple of Thoth, keeper of wisdom, where scribes bent over scrolls by lamplight. Neferet pressed her palms against a cracked door and slipped inside. Shelves towered over her, stacked of papyrus bound in leather straps. The smell of ink and dust filled her lungs. Her eyes widened. Astronomical charts, diagrams of the human body, records of kings and queens long forgotten. Her fingers brushed over one scroll, its title faded with age. On the order of the stars. She opened it, and for the first time, she saw the heavens not as gods alone, but as patterns, movements to be studied, understood, perhaps even predicted. A hand touched her shoulder. She spun. It was an old scribe, his beard white as linen, his eyes sharp but kind. "Princess," he whispered, "you should not be here." Neferet lifted her chin. "Then teach me, so I do not come in ignorance again." For a long moment, the scribe studied her. Then he sighed, and with trembling hands, spread the scroll before her. "Very well, but knowledge is power, and power has enemies." That was the night Neferet's destiny began. Over the years, she returned again and again, learning everything forbidden to her. Medicine, astronomy, diplomacy. She spoke to foreigners in secret, learning their languages, their grievances with Egypt's empire. By 16, her mind was sharper than the generals. By 18, her voice carried like the Nile itself. But shadows followed her. The priests whispered in dark corridors. The generals laughed at the idea of a woman with power. And one priest, draped in black linen, leaned close to a general and murmured words that would echo into history. The princess dreams of a world that is not ours. She must be silenced. The torches flickered. The Nile flowed on. And Neferet, daughter of Pharaoh, stood at the edge of a destiny that would one day shake the world. The moon hung like a silver coin over Thebes, casting long shadows across the palace courtyards. The Nile glimmered softly under its light, whispering against the reeds. In the silence of night, a single figure moved swiftly through the marble corridors, a princess cloaked not in jewels but in secrecy. Neferet, now 16, she walked with quiet confidence. She was taller, her features sharpened by youth into striking elegance, but her eyes still carried that same fire that unnerved the priests. She was no longer a child sneaking into hidden chambers. She was a woman, one who had tasted the power of knowledge and hungered for more. Tonight, she returned to the Temple of Thoth, though not as a trespasser. The old scribe who once caught her, Kai, had become her teacher in secret. In dusty rooms beneath the temple, he unfurled the universe before her. Scrolls of medicine, astronomy, philosophy, and even the laws of neighboring kingdoms. Every empire, Kai whispered, his finger tracing the ink, believes itself eternal, but it is the wise who know. Nothing endures without justice. Neferet leaned forward, eyes sharp. And what of Egypt? Does justice rule here? The old man hesitated, then shook his head. Egypt rules by fear and faith. That balance is fragile. One day it will break. His words struck her like a blade. She thought of her father, the Pharaoh, growing older and more fragile each day. She thought of her brothers, brutish and ambitious, more interested in war than wisdom. She thought of the priests, who spoke in the gods' names but filled their own coffers. In the silence, she whispered, "Then perhaps it must be remade." The weeks turned to months. Neferet's secret education blossomed beyond what Kai could offer. She sought conversations with foreigners, merchants from Nubia, scholars from Mesopotamia, travelers from the Greek Isles who carried strange philosophies on democracy and reason. She disguised herself as a servant girl, slipping into the markets to speak with healers and farmers. There, she discovered the truths hidden from the palace walls. Farmers crushed by endless taxes, children working fields while priests feasted, soldiers sent to die in wars they did not understand. Yet among them, too, she saw hope. They admired her kindness, though they did not know her true name. They called her simply the Woman of the Lotus. And slowly, Neferet began to dream of a different Egypt, an Egypt where knowledge was not hoarded but shared, where women and men alike could learn, heal, and govern, where the Nile's bounty was not squandered by the greedy few, but given to the many. It was during one of these secret ventures that Neferet met Asa, a young Hebrew scholar enslaved in Egypt. Unlike others, he did not bow when she spoke. His eyes met hers directly, full of both defiance and sorrow. "You speak of fairness," Asa told her one evening as they walked by the riverbank, cloaked in shadows. "But fairness cannot exist under chains. Egypt builds its glory on the backs of those it breaks." His words stung because they were true, yet instead of silencing him, Neferet asked, "Then what would you do, Asa, if you had power?" He laughed bitterly. "I would never have power. Men like me die nameless." Neferet's jaw tightened. Then perhaps that is what must change. Not just who rules Egypt, but how. That night, their hands brushed, tentative and forbidden. Their hearts knew the danger, yet still they drew closer. For Neferet, Asa was not only a voice of truth, but a mirror, showing her cracks in the empire she had once thought eternal. But shadows grew longer. The priests began to notice her absences. Her brothers whispered that she was too clever for a woman. A counselor claimed he had seen her speaking with foreigners. Rumors spread that Neferet dabbled in forbidden scrolls, that she sought the throne itself. One night, Kai, her mentor, caught her copying texts by lamplight. His wrinkled hands shook as he gripped her shoulder. Child, you walk on a blade's edge. Knowledge is power, but power draws blood. You must be cautious. Neferet met his gaze, her voice steady. If knowledge is power, then ignorance is slavery. I will not live chained. Kai bowed his head. In his eyes was pride and sorrow and fear. The moment of revelation came during a festival to honor Are. Thousands filled the temple courts, chanting prayers as priests paraded golden statues through the streets. Torches burned, drums thundered, and the Pharaoh, weak but proud, sat upon his throne, carried aloft. Neferet stood beside her brothers, her gaze sharp as a hawk. A priest spoke of destiny, declaring that only the sons of Pharaoh could inherit the throne. The crowd cheered. But then Neferet stepped forward, her voice clear as a bell. Does Are not give light to all? She asked. Does the Nile not feed every man and woman? Then tell me, why should knowledge and power belong to few when the gods themselves belong to all? Gasps echoed through the square. Some cheered, others murmured in fear. Her brothers glared, their fists tightening. The priest's faces darkened like storm clouds. And in the chaos, Asa, hidden among the crowd, looked up at her with awe. That night, when she returned to the palace, Neferet whispered to him, if the throne were mine, Egypt would be reborn. The desert wind howled against the palace walls, as though the gods themselves were restless. For weeks, whispers had coiled through the streets of Thebes. The Pharaoh's daughter had spoken before the crowd, and the crowd had listened. In taverns and marketplaces, her words spread like fire carried on the wind. Does Are not give light to all? Then why should power belong only to the few? For the people, it was a spark of hope. For the priests and generals, it was a spark of rebellion. Inside the palace, Neferet sat before her father, the Pharaoh. His once mighty frame seemed smaller now, shrunken by age and illness. His voice, once as steady as a Nile, trembled when he spoke. Daughter, he murmured, his breath shallow, your words at the festival reach further than you know. The people, they call you the voice of Nile. Neferet bowed her head respectfully, but her eyes did not waver. Then the Nile has spoken the truth. Father, Egypt is in need of change. The Pharaoh's gaze softened with pride, but also with fear. Change invites danger. Already your brothers circle me like vultures. Already the priests whisper curses in their chambers. If I were gone, his hand clutched hers, frail yet urgent. Promise me you will tread carefully. Neferet's heart ached, but she did not promise. She could not. That night, she stood upon the balcony of her chambers, looking out across Thebes. The city pulsed with life, markets alive with torches, children laughing by the river, chants echoing from the temples. She wondered, did they know her? Did they believe in her? A shadow moved behind her. It was Asa, the Hebrew scholar, slipping into her chamber with the ease of a man who no longer feared being caught. You have lit a flame, he said quietly. But flames burn not only the dark, they burn those who hold them. Neferet turned, her expression firm. What would you have me do, Asa? Remain silent while Egypt drowns in greed. He stepped closer, his voice low but fierce. I would have you live, for if you fall, so too does your vision. Their eyes locked. For a moment, silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken truths. Then Neferet whispered, to live without trying is no life at all. Word of Neferet's defiance spread beyond the palace. She began to walk among the people, veiled and cloaked, listening to their grievances. Farmers knelt to her, without knowing her name. Merchants offered her food, sensing her nobility even in disguise. At first, she only listened, but soon she began to speak. Your voices matter, she told them by the riverbanks. The Nile does not choose one man over another. It nourishes all. So too must Egypt. The people began to repeat her words, like prayers whispered to the wind. But in halls of power, storms gathered. Her eldest brother, Prince Setek, stood before the generals, his face twisted with anger. She shames our family, he spat. She dares to speak as though she were Pharaoh. If we allow this, Egypt will fall to chaos. Another brother, Prince Camos, smirked coldly, or perhaps it will fall to her. Do you not hear the people? They cheer her name. Even now, they call her the voice of the Nile. The priests exchanged uneasy glances. One finally muttered, "A woman cannot sit upon the throne. The gods themselves forbid it." But Setek slammed his fist on the table. "Then we shall remind her of her place." Days later, Neferet was summoned to a council chamber lit by flickering oil lamps. Her brothers, priests, and generals stood in a semicircle, their faces carved with disdain. One priest spoke first, his voice dripping with venom. "Princess Neferet, you have wandered where no daughter of Pharaoh should tread. You consort with foreigners, you question the gods, and you dare speak as though the throne could be yours." Neferet did not bow. She lifted her chin. Her voice rang clear. "I do not question the gods. I question men who hide behind them. You preach of order while the people starve. You demand loyalty while you feast. If Egypt is to endure, it will not be by fear, but by justice." Gasps filled the chamber. Seteka's face flushed crimson. "You would bring ruin," he roared. "A woman on the throne? Blasphemy!" Neferet stepped closer, her eyes blazing. "No, brother, not blasphemy. Renewal. Egypt does not need another warlord. It needs a shepherd of its people. And that I will be." For a moment, silence crushed the room. Then, from the shadows, Kai, the old scribe, stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "The voice of the Nile speaks truth. Perhaps the gods have chosen differently than you think." The chamber erupted in chaos, shouts, curses, threats. Neferet stood tall amid the storm, her heart pounding but unbroken. That night, she returned to Asa. Her hands trembled as she told him what had transpired. "They will come for me," she said, her voice cracking. "I have crossed a line that cannot be uncrossed." Asa took her hands, steadying her. "Then you must be ready, for if you fall, so too will the chance for Egypt to change." She looked at him, her jaw set with steel. "Then I will not fall." Outside, thunder rolled across the desert. The rising storm had begun. The palace of Thebes trembled with mourning. The Pharaoh, the living son of Ra, was dead. His body lay in a golden coffin, guarded by priests chanting prayers to guide him into the afterlife. The halls smelled of incense and grief, but beneath the ritual there was something sharper: ambition. Egypt did not pause long for sorrow. It demanded a ruler, and so the council was called. The chamber of judgment glittered with braziers, the smoke curling like spirits toward the high, painted ceiling. Rows of priests, generals, and scribes gathered in a circle. At the center stood Neferet, her brothers Setek and Chamos, and their mother, Queen Anip, veiled in mourning black. Seteka's voice thundered first. "As eldest son, the throne is mine by right. The gods chose me from birth, as they chose our father before me." Chamos smirked. "The gods may have chosen you, brother, but the people do not cheer your name. They whisper another, the voice of Nile." All eyes turned to Neferet. She stood calm, dressed not in silks, but in a simple linen robe, the blue of the Nile woven into its hem. No crown rested on her head, only the fire of conviction in her eyes. She spoke, her voice clear, echoing against the stone walls. "Egypt is not stone and gold. It is its people. Farmers who bend their backs in the sun, scribes who ink their lives into papyrus, soldiers who bleed in the sand. For too long, Egypt has been ruled by fear and pride. But I tell you this, if Egypt is to endure, it must be ruled by justice." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some nodded. Others crossed their arms in disapproval. Setek sneered. "And who are you to speak of justice, sister? A woman? You would make Egypt a mockery of every kingdom. You would undo thousands of years of order." Neferet stepped closer, her gaze unflinching. "I am the daughter of Pharaoh, chosen at birth beneath the shadow of Ra's eclipse. I have studied the stars, the laws of men, the medicine of healers. I have walked among the people while you feasted in marble halls. I know their suffering, their hunger, their hope. That is why they call me the voice of the Nile. Because I do not speak only for myself, I speak for them." The chamber erupted. Cheers from scribes, shouts of anger from generals. The priests exchanged uneasy looks. Queen Anip lifted her veil, her voice trembling but resolute. Our Pharaoh loved all his children, but in his final days, he spoke of one above the rest. He saw wisdom in Neferet that he did not see in his sons. The silence that followed was thunderous. Seteka's face turned scarlet. Chamos clenched his fists. A general rose, his bronze armor gleaming. If she truly speaks to the people, then let the people decide. The next day, a proclamation was made. Before the temple of Ammonius, in the heart of Thebes, the candidates would present their visions for Egypt. The people would gather, and the council would witness who carried the favor of the gods and the will of the Nile. By dawn, the square overflowed. Farmers with callous hands, merchants with jingling coin, mothers clutching their children, all pressed forward to glimpse history. Setek stood first. Dressed in gold and crimson, he raised his arms dramatically. "I am the sword of Egypt," he cried. "I will lead our armies to conquer new lands, to bring wealth and glory unmatched. The gods demand strength, and I shall give it." Some cheered, but many frowned. They were weary of war. Chamos followed, draped in white, his tone smooth as oil. "I am the shield of Egypt. I will protect our borders, keep our enemies at bay, and preserve the order of our fathers. Egypt needs stability, not change. The gods bless tradition, and so must we." The priests nodded approvingly, but the people remained silent. Then Neferet stepped forward. No crown, no gold, only the blue linen robe and the fire in her voice. She raised her hand, and the crowd hushed. Egypt is not made great by conquest, nor by fear of what is old. Egypt is made great by its people. What is the strength of an army if the farmer has no bread? What is the wisdom of priests if knowledge is hidden in shadows? What is the glory of Pharaoh if his people suffer in silence? The crowd stirred, voices murmuring in agreement. Neferet's eyes swept across them, fierce and shining. If the throne were mine, there would be schools for all children, not only sons of scribes. There would be healers in every village, not only in palaces. No man would be slave to another, for the Nile does not choose its waters. It gives freely to all. A silence followed, heavy and breathless. Then a cheer rose, from one man, then 10, then hundreds. Soon, the entire square thundered with her name. Neferet, Neferet, the voice of the Nile. Her brothers' faces twisted in rage, but they could not drown the sound. It rolled like a flood through Thebes, unstoppable, undeniable. At that moment, Neferet knew the people had chosen her. But power is never surrendered willingly. That night, as the palace slept, Setek and Chamos met in secret. Their voices were sharp, hushed but venomous. "She has stolen the people," Chamos hissed. "She will not steal the throne," Setek growled. His hand closed over the hilt of his dagger. "If Egypt will not silence her, then we must." And so, the battle for the throne had truly begun, not in the square, but in the shadows. The cheers of the crowd still echoed in Neferet's ears as she lay awake that night. For the first time, she felt the full weight of destiny pressing upon her shoulders. Not as a burden, but as a calling. The people had spoken. They had lifted her name above the sons of Pharaoh. She could almost see it now. Schools rising along the Nile, women learning alongside men, healers tending to the sick in every village, and chains falling from the enslaved. Egypt could be reborn. But outside her chamber, shadows stirred. Her brothers met with the high priest under the cover of darkness. The temple torches flickered, casting monstrous silhouettes across the stone walls. Seteka's face was carved with fury. "You heard them. They shouted her name. Not mine. Not Chamos. Hers. A woman. She has bewitched the people with her lies." Chamos leaned forward, his tone colder. "If she takes the throne, the priests lose their grip. Knowledge will be freed, power shared. Do you not see? She threatens the order of Egypt itself." The high priest of Ammonius, draped in gold and leopard skin, narrowed his eyes. "A woman on the throne is an insult to the gods. But the people are fickle. If we strike her down openly, we risk revolt. She must fall quietly." A thin smile curled Seteka's lips. "Then so be it. Tomorrow, the voice of the Nile will be silenced. At dawn, Neferet was summoned to the temple under the guise of offering prayers for her father's spirit. She walked the grand hall, her footsteps echoing against towering columns painted with stars. Incense curled upward, heavy and suffocating. She knelt before the altar, eyes closed, whispering her father's name. But when she rose, the chamber doors slammed shut. Her brother stood behind her, flanked by guards. The high priest stepped forward, his staff gleaming like a serpent. "Neferet, daughter of Pharaoh," he intoned, his voice booming, "you are accused of blasphemy against the gods, of treason against Egypt, and of consorting with slaves and foreigners." Gasps rippled to the gathered priests and generals. Neferet's eyes widened, but she did not flinch. "These are lies," she said, her voice steady. "You fear me not because I offend the gods, but because I threaten your power." Setek sneered. "Power belongs to men, sister. To kings, not to a woman who defies the order of Ma'at." Camo smirked. "The people may cheer for you now, but they will forget. We will write the histories. And in those histories, you will never have lived." The trial was swift, the verdict predetermined. Neferet was stripped of her titles, her name struck from the royal scrolls. She was declared cursed, an enemy of the gods. The people were told she had betrayed them, that she had plotted with foreign enemies to seize the throne. Soldiers marched through the streets, spreading the lies. The voice of the Nile became, overnight, the serpent of the Nile. And so, her story began to vanish before it could be written. But Asa did not forget. When the guards dragged Neferet through the palace, chains biting her wrists, Asa slipped from the shadows. His eyes burned with desperation. "I can get you out," he whispered fiercely. "There are tunnels beneath the temple, passages known only to the slaves. You can flee beyond Egypt's borders." For the first time, Neferet's strength wavered. Her eyes glistened with tears. "If I run, Asa, they will say I was guilty. My dream will die." He gripped her hand through the chains. "If you stay, you will die. And then your dream dies with you." Her breath caught. She looked into his eyes, and for a fleeting moment, she longed only for a life where they could be free together, far from crowns and chains. But destiny was merciless. "I cannot abandon Egypt," she whispered. "Even if they erase me, the seed has been planted. The people have heard me. One day, they will remember." Asa's voice broke. "And what of me am I to remember alone?" Her lips trembled. She leaned forward, pressing her forehead against his. "Then remember for both of us." By nightfall, Neferet was taken to the edge of the desert. The sentence was exile, banishment into the sands, where few survived. Her brothers stood watching as the guards led her away. Seteka's voice rang out cold and triumphant. "Let the desert claim her. Let the winds erase her name. Egypt belongs to men, as it always has." But as the torches flickered, Neferet turned her head. Her eyes locked with the crowd that had gathered in silence. Farmers, scribes, mothers, children. They stood at a distance, afraid to speak, but their eyes shone with grief and defiance. She straightened her back, chains clinking, and lifted her voice one last time. "Remember me not as a princess, but as the Nile itself. You may bury my name, but you cannot bury the river. One day, it will rise again." The guard shoved her forward into the blackness of the desert night. And so, the voice of the Nile was swallowed by silence. The desert swallowed her. The chains had been cut from her wrists, but the weight of betrayal pressed heavier than iron. Neferet walked barefoot across shifting sands, the moon a pale witness above her. The guards had left her with nothing. No food, no water, no shelter. Only the endless horizon and the howl of the wind. Most who faced such exile perished within days. But Neferet was not like most. At dawn, she stumbled into a valley of jagged cliffs. The sun scorched her skin, her lips cracked with thirst. She collapsed in the shadow of a boulder, half conscious. As darkness claimed her, she thought of Asa, his voice, his touch, the way his eyes had burned when he swore to remember. When she woke, there was a figure standing over her, an old woman, draped in rough linen, her skin like weathered stone. She carried a clay jar of water and a bundle of herbs. Without a word, she pressed the jar to Neferet's lips. "Drink," the woman said simply. Neferet obeyed, the water searing her throat like fire and relief. The woman studied her face. "You are no common wanderer. Who are you?" Neferet hesitated. If she spoke her name, it could condemn her. But something in the woman's eyes, sharp, knowing, pulled the truth from her lips. "I am Neferet, daughter of Pharaoh." The old woman nodded as though she had expected it. "Then the gods have not abandoned you. Come, you have much to endure." The woman's name was Merit, a healer who lived with a small band of desert nomads. They welcomed Neferet, though they did not ask questions. Among them, she learned to survive. She learned to track the stars for direction, to draw water from hidden wells, to brew healing salves from desert herbs. She rode camels across endless dunes, her hair tangled with sand and wind. The princess became a wanderer, her silks replaced with coarse cloth, her jewels with scars. But even in exile, Neferet's fire did not die. Around the nomad's fire, she told stories of Egypt, not of pharaohs or conquests, but of ordinary people. The farmer who deserved rest, the child who deserved learning, the woman who deserved to be heard. The nomads listened wide-eyed and began to call her the river in the desert. Years passed. In Thebes, her name was erased from temples, her image chipped from stone. Scribes who remembered her were silenced. Priests declared her cursed, and stories spread of a wicked princess who betrayed Egypt. But in secret, whispers survived. Among slaves in the fields, they spoke of the voice of the Nile, who had promised freedom. Among mothers, they told their children of the princess who said the gods belonged to all. Among scribes, her words were copied in hidden ink, buried in jars beneath the sand. Neferet had been erased from history, yet she lived on in memory. One night, as the nomads camped beneath a sky blazing with stars, Ace appeared. His hair was longer, his face hardened by years of struggle, but his eyes were the same. Neferet froze as he stepped into the firelight, her heart leaping and breaking at once. "Asa," she whispered. He felt his knees before her. "I searched every village, every market, every desert path. They told me you were dead, but I knew you lived." Tears blurred her vision. She reached for him, her hands trembling. "You should have left me behind. Egypt is lost." But Asa shook his head fiercely. "Egypt is not lost. The people remember. They whisper your name like prayer. Farmers, healers, even soldiers. They call you the queen who should have been." Her chest ached with both pride and sorrow. "And yet I am nothing but a ghost." He gripped her hands. "Ghosts cannot be erased. They haunt the living. And you, Neferet, you haunt all of Egypt." For a time, they stayed together, hidden among the nomads. Their love, forbidden for so long, finally blossomed without chains. They walked hand in hand beneath the stars, whispering dreams of a life beyond thrones and crowns. But peace was fleeting. News reached them that Setek had declared himself Pharaoh. His rule was cruel, his hunger for war endless. The people groaned beneath heavier taxes. Slaves were driven harder, and famine spread like fire through villages. One evening, Asa turned to her, his face grave. "The people need you again, more than ever." Neferet's heart wavered. "I am but one woman, exiled, erased. How can I fight a pharaoh?" But Asa's eyes held steady. "You already have. Once, and they still speak your words. If you rise again, they will follow." The desert wind howled that night, carrying the voices of memory. Neferet stood on a dune, staring toward the distant lights of Thebes. Her exile had not broken her. It had forged her, and in her heart, she knew, the Nile could not be silenced forever. The desert winds carried her back. Neferet stood upon the ridge of a dune, gazing at Thebes glowing in the distance. The city of her birth, the city of her betrayal. Torches flickered along its walls, and the great temples rose like mountains of stone. But beneath their grandeur she could feel it, the weight of suffering. Egypt groaned under Setek's rule. His armies bled the land for conquest. His priests demanded endless offerings, and his hunger for power devoured the Nile's bounty. The whispers were true. Famine stalked the villages. Rebellion simmered in the fields. The people still remembered the voice of the Nile. And Neferet could not remain a ghost forever. She returned in secret, cloaked in plain linen, walking the streets as she once had. What she saw broke her heart. Children scavenging for scraps, mothers with eyes sunken from hunger, farmers beaten by tax collectors until their backs bled. Yet when they looked at her, this veiled stranger, something stirred, a recognition they could not name. And when she spoke, softly, they leaned closer. "The Nile still flows," she told them. "And so too does hope. Egypt belongs to you, not a tyrant's." Her words spread like fire on dry reeds. Soon, in marketplaces and taverns, in whispers passed from mother to child, her name returned. Neferet, the lost daughter, the voice of the Nile. Asa urged caution, but Neferet's resolve hardened. "If I remain silent, they win. My brothers may have erased me from stone, but they cannot erase me from the living." And so she gathered those who still believed. Farmers, scribes, nomads, even soldiers weary of Seteka's cruelty. By torchlight, they pledged themselves not to a crown, but to a vision, an Egypt of justice. It was not an army, it was a seed. But seeds, once sown, cannot be buried forever. But Setek was no fool. Reports reached him of gatherings, of whispers in the night. The priests warned of a ghost haunting Egypt, the very name he had tried to erase. Enraged, he ordered a trap during the festival of the flood. When the Nile's waters rose and the people gathered to give thanks, Setek demanded all come to the temple. Priests led chants, drums thundered, incense clouded the air. And then a voice rose above the noise. Clear, fierce, unmistakable. Neferet stepped into the square, unveiled. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Some fell to their knees, weeping. Others cried her name. Neferet, the voice of the Nile. Seteka's face twisted with rage. "Seize her," he bellowed. Guards surged forward, but the crowd surged too, shielding her, chanting her name like a battle cry. The square became chaos, fists and blades flashing in the torchlight. Neferet raised her hands, her voice slicing through the storm. "I am not here to take a throne. I am here to remind you, Egypt is yours. You are the Nile, and no tyrant can stop its flood." The people roared, their voices shaking the very stones. But in the chaos, betrayal struck. A blade flashed from the shadows, not from a guard, but from a priest. It pierced Neferet's side, the force driving her to her knees. The crowd screamed. Asa rushed to her, catching her before she fell. Blood darkened her linen robe, spreading like the Nile at flood. Her breath came ragged, but her eyes burned bright. "Asa," she whispered, her hand trembling in his, "do not let them bury me. Do not let them bury the dream." Tears streamed down his face. "I swear it. Even if they erase your name, I will remember. We all will." Her lips curved into the faintest smile. "Then I am not lost." Her eyes closed. Her voice, the voice of the Nile, fell silent. The crowd wept and raged. Some tried to carry her body, but Seteka's soldiers surged, scattering the people. The priests declared her a traitor struck down by the gods. Her body was taken, hidden, her grave left unmarked. Her name was scratched from papyrus, chiseled off temple walls, smeared from every scroll. The history of Egypt swallowed her whole, leaving only silence. And yet silence is never truly empty. In secret, mothers told their children of the princess who spoke the poor. Scribes have fragments of her words in jars, buried beneath sand. Nomads carried her story across deserts, whispering of the river in the desert. Asa lived on, scarred by grief but steadfast. Wherever he went, he told her story, passing it from one generation to the next. And so, though her name was erased, her legacy endured, not in temples of stone, but in the hearts of the forgotten. Neferet had been a woman erased by history, but history itself could not silence her, for as long as the Nile flowed, so too did her voice.